Hey everybody, I'm Will Garcia.
And I'm Josh Earl.
And together we are the Hoops Guys. And in continuation of our 2014-15 NBA team season previews, today we are taking a look at the Minnesota Timberwolves. How'd they do last year, Josh?
Meh.
Yeah.
They finished with a sub 500 record, 40-42.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of is misleading in a way. They were in the West, which was really tough, and they played pretty well.
This isn't your typical sub 500 team.
No, it's not. Of course, that doesn't mask the fact that this has now been a decade for this franchise since they've made the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, it didn't meet their expectations.
No.
That said, there were some good things that happened this year for the T-Wolves.
Absolutely. And one of those things was that they had a really solid offense. They finished 9th in offensive rating. And a big part of that was due to quality shot selection. They tied for fourth in XPPS. There's an awesome stat from Ian Levy out at Nylon Calculus. There's a link in the description box below where you can check it out and play with it. It's really cool.
Yep.
But it's expected points per shot. And they were also 5th in restricted area shot attempts, which, again, a huge part of that is due to Kevin Love and Nikola Pekovic being killer offensive rebounds and getting those putbacks and tip-ins.
Yep.
And then they also had the 10th fewest mid-range shot attempts.
Yeah. Beyond just converting shots and shot selection, they were really good in the other 3 factors from Dean Oliver's 4 factors. They protected the ball well, finishing 2nd in turnover rate. They got to the free throw line and converted from there really well, finishing 4th in free throw per field goal attempt and 9th in free throw percentage.
Yep.
And no surprise, given the presence of Kevin Love and Nikola Pekovic, as just mentioned, they cleaned the offensive glass like Windex, ranking 6th in offensive rebound rate.
Yeah. They killed that in terms of getting those offensive boards. And surprisingly enough, neither of those two guys are amazing defensively, but the team still had a solid year on that end of the court as well. They finished 12th in defensive rating, and they were generally able to force opponents into less valuable looks because, as you can tell, they finished 9th in defensive XPPS.
Yeah. Part of it was their defensive philosophy. It prioritized not sending opponents to the free throw line, which makes sense since that's actually the most valuable shot in basketball. So it wasn't really surprising to see that they ended the season 1st in defensive free throw per field goal attempt. They also forced opponents to cough up the ball a lot, which was evidenced by their 6th place finish in defensive turnover rate.
Yeah. Speaking of a guy who did... I believe we're going to do a cut, but that's fine. Kevin Love, actually, let's do a count. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But it wasn't just the team in general that had good things going on for it. Kevin Love had a killer year yet again. He's always an outstanding scorer and a rebounder, but this year he really grew as a facilitator. You kind of come to expect the 26 and 12 at a minimum out of this guy, but he also passed out over 4 assists per game. And if you're a big dude and not named Joakim Noah, that's first place.
Yeah. Beyond that, he also had a major impact with his perimeter shooting, making the 7th most three-pointers per game at 2.5. And he shot them at a 38% clip, which, generally speaking, people are probably going to look at that and be like, that's not great. It's not 40+%. But you have to realize the volume at which he shot them and how focused the defense was on him in taking
He's
those.
one of those gravity guys where he draws the defense. And especially when you're a big guy who can draw a Serge Ibaka out of the paint or can draw a really solid, like an Anthony Davis, out of the paint. If you're the kind of guy who can get those amazing shot blockers to stay out of their zone because of your perimeter shooting, you are so valuable.
Yeah. Speaking of good shot blockers, another guy who had a good year was Gorgui Dieng. Why don't you tell us a little bit about his year?
Yeah, Gorgui Dieng did have a great year, especially during the second half of the season. On the first half of the season, he mostly rode pine. But after the All-Star break, he averaged 8 points, 8 boards, and a little over a block per game. And he did all that at 57% true shooting. And then he had a monstrous month of April where he averaged 12 points and 11 boards, and as well as 2 blocks. And he really provided this team with something they haven't had in a long time, and that's a damn good rim protector.
Yes. It's tough to really say anything negative about Gorgui. He had a great year as a rookie. I was kind of peeved that some of my favorite teams overlooked him in the draft and thought he would have a good shot. And luckily, he actually was able to get some minutes post All-Star break, and he cooks in 3 minutes. As we're prone to say, he's a ramen noodle all-star. Yep.
Doesn't his name mean old man?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm pretty sure. I don't know what language it's in. Maybe hit me up in the comments saying what it is. But I'm pretty sure his name translates to old man in in African language. And that's kind of, funnily enough, why I think teams didn't draft him. But I think they're regretting it now.
Yeah, that was entirely why teams didn't draft him. He's already 25. So.
Yeah.
But productive.
Speaking of a guy who's almost 25, Ricky Rubio just turned 24 last week. Why don't you tell us a bit about him?
Yeah, so Ricky had an improved year from previous. He upped his three-point shooting percentage from 29% to 33%. He cut his turnovers and finished second in the league in steals per game. And he's not just one of those guys who gambles passing lanes a lot. He's also a very capable on-ball defender, able to generate steals that way.
He's not being a Jennings out there.
No. And he also played all 82 games, which is the first time in his NBA career, at least, that he played more than 57 in a season. So between the improved three-point shooting, cutting his turnovers, and causing defensive disruption on the perimeter,
and actually staying on the court,
and actually staying healthy, he had a nice year.
He did have a really nice year. One thing with Ricky Rubio, and this is why I think people seem to he doesn't get the most points. That's not really his game. The thing that people kind of sleep on him a bit. So one thing that I found is that if you compare his statistics to Jason Kidd, no, I'm just comparing statistics, nothing alike as human beings. But having said that, you have 10 points for Ricky versus 13, 8 assists for both of them, similar shooting splits, so 37% field goal percent for Rubio, 38% for Kidd. Both of them shot exactly 32% from 3 on similar numbers of attempts. They got to the line at similar rates. They stole the ball at similar steal rates. These are very, in terms of as players and in terms of the skill sets that they can bring, especially from their first 3 seasons, is what we're looking at here. It's the kind of thing where everyone, I find it kind of weird, everyone from the beginning thought Jason Kidd was a pretty awesome point guard. And I guess, I don't know if opinions changed or the way we value players has changed, but people aren't saying the same about Ricky Rubio. I see a lot more negativity than I do positivity with Rubio, but he can do so much. He's just a magician out there.
Yeah, well, I always thought it was kind of interesting because the expectations set up for Rubio coming over, at least general public perception. I've been saying skill set wise, he was a lot like Kidd way before he even came over. Not to plug myself, but kind of. But the expectations placed on him was that he was going to be the next Steve Nash, who's a really good shooter and just an offensive maestro. Or that he'd be the next Pistol Pete, who, once again, killer scorer. The guy averaged crazy numbers in college and in the NBA, and that's simply not Ricky's game. His game is being a really good on-ball and team defensive point guard who can crash the boards well, and who has phenomenal court vision and is able to process what's about to happen on the court 2-3 steps ahead of pretty much everyone else.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like the skill sets Jason Kidd brought.
Exactly.
You know? So I think it's a very apt comparison in terms of player skill sets. I hate overall player comparisons.
Agreed.
When looking at skill sets, I think he has a lot of similarities to Jason Kidd. And considering that Asen Kidd was eventually able to earn that J in his name, I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of his career, Ricky is not a god-awful shooter.
Exactly. Speaking of god-awful, one thing that was kind of awful, I wouldn't say god-awful, but it's that the Timberwolves struggled at just making shots.
Yeah.
Other than Love and Pekovic and Kevin Martin, there wasn't anybody on this team who was a reliable or consistent scoring threat.
Pretty much nobody, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, J.J. Barea had an awful year. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, and I think the numbers back that up. I mean, they were 29th in corner three field goal percentage, 20th in restricted area field goal percentage, so shots at the rim. Even though they got a lot of shots there, they didn't really convert that well. Part of that's on Ricky. 20th in above the break three-point field goal percentage and 29th in mid-range field goal percentage. And while they got good shots at the rim and they got to the free throw line, they really struggled with those other analytically valuable shots. So not only didn't they convert well from corner threes, but they shot the 23rd fewest corner three attempts.
Right.
And on top of it, they were 25th in terms of in the paint field goal attempts. So
yeah, and a lot of those struggles really carried over onto the defensive end as well. The Wolves only finished 27th in defensive effective field goal percentage and 21st in defensive points per shot.
Yeah, and a large part of this is, and in a lot of ways it's systemic and personnel-wise, there really wasn't rim protection. Their defense was geared towards not fouling, and neither Kevin Love or Nikola Pekovic are really shot blockers by nature, so there was really no rim protection. And because of that, it's not a big surprise that they finished 29th in restricted area defensive field goal percentage and dead last in blocks per game.
Yeah, agreed. The interior defense and rim protection was a problem, but that wasn't the only problem, and a lot of problems stretched out into the perimeter. Teams made perimeter shots against the Wolves, who tied for 21st in mid-range defensive field goal percentage and above-the-break defensive field goal percentage.
Yeah, but it wasn't just the team that had some struggles. A couple of players didn't have great seasons either. Main guy, Corey Brewer. So he had a 51-point game, which is crazy. Not a lot of players can say they scored over 50 in an NBA game. But that said, he had a terrible shooting season.
Yeah.
For any of you guys who happened to watch our Sixers preview, there was a part in there where we talked about the worst three-point percentage shooters in NBA history that took at least 200 three-point attempts in a single season. Corey Brewer was 15th worst on that list.
Yep.
He shot 28% from three, just 28% from three on roughly 3 threes a game.
Yeah.
And
Ouch.
this isn't like with Michael Carter-Williams, who was kind of miscast in a primary scoring role and kind of had to throw up a lot of off-the-bounce threes under highly contested circumstances.
Right.
Corey was mostly getting catch-and-shoot threes and corner three opportunities. He just really isn't a 3-and-D guy, no matter how much people think he is. And I think on top of it, he's going to have a worse year this year. And I don't mean to pile all on Corey, but a large part of his production and any sort of efficiency that he had in other areas was largely due to him really liking to leak out in transition, and Kevin Love just dropping outstanding outlets, feeding Brewer for easy looks. That's gone.
Yep.
So if you're a T-Wolves fan, don't be shocked if Wiggins takes over Brewer's minutes pretty quickly, because Brewer's going to have a rough year.
Yeah. Speaking of having a rough year, the Wolves had a rough year when it came to close games.
Yes.
Per Zach Harper of CBS Sports, got to give credit, they only finished 6-13 in games decided by 4 or fewer points. That hurts.
Yeah, and it makes sense because, like you mentioned earlier, outside of Peck, Love, and Kevin Martin, whom the defenses are all keyed in on and focused on, there really weren't any scoring threats. So when it comes down to crunch time, the defenses know who they have to focus on.
Yeah, and the Wolves finished top 10 in margin of victory and strength of schedule, and like we alluded to, they finished both top 12 in offensive and defensive rating. So this team was good. They just struggled to win games.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds kind of like a paradox, but really that's the best way I can describe this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's what happened. But there are some, obviously there were some big changes this offseason, and there's a new influx of talent that they're hoping, if not this year, maybe over the next couple of years, they'll be able to break that playoff missing streak that they've been on. One such new talent is Andrew
Wiggins. Yeah, remember everyone who said, they don't have the leverage. Yeah, they had the leverage. Andrew Wiggins was the first pick in the 2014 draft, basically the centerpiece in the trade for Kevin Love. And he's been touted as an elite prospect for a couple of years now.
Yep.
He has all of the raw tools and physical attributes you would want out of a wing prospect. He has a 7-foot wingspan, 9-foot standing reach, a 44-inch vert. Let me say that again, just in case the amazingness of that didn't get into your brain. 44-inch vertical leap.
Yep.
It's insane. He did struggle a bit on offense at Kansas, though. Especially, he was an average perimeter shooter, only shooting about 34% from 3. Wasn't a very good facilitator. And he was pretty mediocre in terms of being able to create off the bounce.
Yeah.
Still, though, he's a pretty solid man defender right now.
Yep.
And he'll be useful right away in that role. And with his skill set, the way it is right now, he's basically what you'd want Corey Brewer to be able to do. So there's no real, I think he can come in and just usurp Corey Brewer.
And I think that man defense that he'll be able to provide, and the willingness to play that defense is what's going to get him minutes early on, even despite the fact that most number 1 overall picks are going to get minutes. I think it's his defense that's really going to get him any major minutes to start this season off.
Yeah, and he's only 19. I mean, what do you really expect in terms of skill set?
Yeah. One guy who had a really rough year last year,
so many ways,
was also included in that Kevin Love deal and is also a number 1 overall pick, Anthony Bennett.
Yeah.
He was kind of the guy everyone liked to dump on last year, but a lot of that was due to poor circumstances that were somewhat out of his control that led to a really rough rookie year for him. And those circumstances, for the most part, are gone now. He isn't coming off of an injury that prevented him from working out to get into game shape before the season. He had a surgery to remove his tonsils and adenoids so that it would help his sleep apnea and asthma, which were problems last year, so those aren't a problem this year. Furthermore, he's no longer really under the microscope of being the first overall pick in terms of expectations. In fact, after last year, the expectations on Bennett are probably supremely low.
Yeah.
So he doesn't necessarily have as much pressure on him in that regard.
Yeah.
And he's not a rookie anymore. He's at least experienced an NBA season. And while confidence was very much an issue last year in terms of his rough rookie year, in part due to a really terrible start of the season, shooting-wise, which kind of built upon itself and became like this never-ending cycle of not really doing that well shot-wise, and then confidence issues. While that might still be somewhat problematic, he's got a pretty good chance to change that this year.
Yeah.
And honestly, I still think at some point over his career, he can be an all-star in this league. In college, he showed the ability to score out of post-ups, ISO shot creation abilities, a pretty decent shot. Not a killer shot, but a decent shot, suggesting some ability to maybe stretch the floor a little bit. And he's got a willingness to run. And with this team, that they're going to run. At least that would be smart by Flip Saunders' sake. To let Ricky just run with these young guns and just kind of play as fast-paced as they can.
Yeah, and the big thing with Bennett is that he is a big man.
Yep.
It's another one of those situations we keep talking about. It comes up
the tweeners.
Time and time again. Is a tweener. And when you're the kind of guy who made your game based around being able to get past bigger and some maybe slower defenders, and that's the way your game is set up, moving that over to the 3 where you don't have that advantage anymore, it can make a guy struggle. And I think putting Anthony Bennett at the 3 has kind of a similar thing to like we mentioned with like Joe Alexander, or we mentioned with what should happen with Jabari Parker or Carmelo Anthony. It's the kind of thing where the way his game is set up, it lends itself better to him being a mismatched 4 than an outmatched 3.
Yeah. And the nice thing is there'll be some ability for them to run some versatile lineups with him and Thaddeus Young, both capable of filling either the 4 or the 3 position in terms of responsibilities. But Wiggins and Bennett aren't the only new young guys coming into this roster and parts of the new young core. Another guy was the T-Wolves pick, Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
Will and I aren't that high on him.
No.
We weren't huge fans of him from college. That said, he's a very athletic player with a really decent handle. He's going to get backup minutes at both backcourt positions. In fact, with J.J. Barea being waived recently, he's likely going to be their third point guard behind Ricky and Mo Williams.
Yeah.
Some of the problems with him, at least right now, is he's not a particularly adept decision maker with the ball.
No.
And he has this weird tendency where he doesn't always square his feet and body to the basket when shooting, which hurts his shooting consistency. And this could be problematic on a team that desperately needs some consistent, good shooting. So I think he'll be able to bring a lot of excitement to the Minnesota fans and to League Pass fans and followers of SportsCenter top 10 plays. But I don't think he's going to bring much else beyond that.
Agreed.
In his rookie year, at least.
Yeah, he's a project.
Yeah.
A guy who was a project, but when he was drafted, but now is a veteran in the NBA, is Thaddeus Young.
Yeah.
He's operated mostly as a face-up 4 last year as sort of the primary option for the 76ers. I don't think he's going to be in that big of a role here in Minnesota, but it'll be interesting, like you mentioned, with the versatility he has, being able to play multiple positions. But there will be a significant rebounding drop-off between going from Kevin Love to Thaddeus Young. Thaddeus Young has never been a particularly adept boards guy.
Yeah.
So that'll be something to watch out on, to see how they kind of use him, because he isn't exactly a knockdown three-point shooter, but he can kind of do it.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is...
He's mostly a mid-range guy.
Neither him or Anthony Bennett really have the gravity that Kevin Love has from the perimeter, but both of those guys are at least somewhat capable 3-point shooters, or at least have shown an ability to possibly be that. So in some ways, the T-Wolves will still be able to run some of the same type of sets and actions that they did last year. Just it won't be quite as impactful because they don't have the same type of gravity and respect around the league from the three as K-Love does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then another guy who can shoot the three is Mo Williams.
Yep.
He's a capable 3-point shooter, a good shot creator for himself, kind of a cool change of pace guy. I see him doing a lot of what JJ Barea did for this team.
Yep.
JJ Barea, who just recently got waived. We'll talk about that in a second. But that was a nice addition. I liked it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it wasn't all additions. There were some subtractions, including a pretty major one.
Yeah. Kevin Love's gone.
Yeah.
Moment of silence for Wolves fans.
Pour one out for K-Love.
Yeah. The Wolves lost their franchise player, and they're going to struggle to make up for it, essentially, because the way he was able to rebound, the way he was able to pass, especially to get things out in transition, what he was able to do in the interior, what he was able to do outside, what he was able to do as a shot creator, they don't have the people on their roster to really make up for that. So it'll be interesting to see how they try to counterbalance.
Yeah.
A guy who they got rid of, like we alluded to earlier, JJ Barea, he had a really rough year, had a career low in true shooting percentage at 47, yikes, and shot under 32% from three. And when your whole sort of selling point is that you're a scoring guard who operates largely from the perimeter, those two things are a huge problem.
Yeah. Speaking of a huge problem, like we alluded to multiple times already, the T-Wolves kind of lacked for shooters.
Yep.
And consistent scoring threats. One guy who was a nice piece and a nice defender for them, but kind of wasn't able to play a major role because of the lack of a shot was Luke Richard Mbah-a-Moute.
Mm-hmm.
Very good man and team defender and a great locker room guy, but his inability to really be much of a threat shooting-wise was problematic on a team that already has a lot of issues spacing the floor.
Absolutely.
Another guy who had a tough time shooting for the T-Wolves last year was Alexei Shved. He struggled a lot in his 2 years in Minnesota. Sorry, Zach Harper. I know you're a Shved fan. Apologize. But with a career true shooting percentage of 47%,
that's not good.
That just further compounded the shooting issues the T-Wolves had. And, they have a guy, Zach LaVine's going to take his old role as kind of the backup combo guard who gets minutes at both the 1 and the 2.
Yeah, they're polar opposites as players, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing that we like to do around here, it's called possession delta, and it's the number of possessions that in this case, the Wolves brought in during free agency through like free agent acquisitions, essentially, versus trades, that kind of stuff, versus what they lost in free agency and trades. So one thing that was pretty interesting is that they actually have a surplus coming in despite losing Kevin Love.
Yeah, which is on the face of it kind of crazy, but when you look at Thad from Philly, you get a sense of why.
Yeah, Thad's 16.5 shots per game, young. Bringing that in basically eats up all the Kevin Love shots. And then from there, you have Mo Williams coming in, Anthony Bennett coming in, and then I also did this calculation before Barea got waived.
Yeah.
And I forgot to update it. My apologies. So, in reality, it's probably, they have a slight, it's probably slightly negative.
Yeah.
Considering that Barea probably took up more than 3. I know he took up more than 3. But there's a little bit, but it's nothing all that big.
No.
Especially when you're factoring that and getting that guys like Wiggins came in as well, and Levine, which we can't really put rookies into there because they haven't ever even taken a shot on the NBA level. How do you calculate that? So I think that a couple of guys are going to be in some smaller roles. Obviously, Thad Young.
Corey Brewer.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a thing. And then you also have to look at a guy like Nikola Pekovic because he's going to be on a minutes restriction. More on that later. So some guys are going to be taking smaller roles.
Yeah.
So
there's a second stat that we like to do here that's kind of proprietary, and that's rest differential, and all that's
Josh's stat.
Is just looking at the number of road back-to-backs, 4 games in 5 nights, 3 games in 4 nights for the team over the course of the season compared with their opponents over the course of the season. Yep. Their rest differential is a positive 24.
That's really
good.
So
they're going to be extremely well-rested compared to their opponents over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Which is going to be obviously helpful, especially in cases like Peck.
Yeah. Peck's ankles will be thanking you.
Injury issues. And, Ricky, prior to this season, had never played more than 57 games in an NBA season. So there are a couple of guys who've had a little bit of injury histories that this is probably going to be helpful for, but it's also not, even if it was a negative, it wouldn't be a major issue because they got a lot of young players on this team.
Yeah.
Wiggins,
it's not going to kill Wiggins.
Bennett, Glenn Robinson if he makes the roster, which seems likely.
Right.
Gorgie Zhang, Ricky, they've got a lot of guys who can
handle it.
Get up and down and play multiple games, and they're young. They'll be fine.
Yeah, but this helps.
Yeah, but this rest differential is going to help probably make the T-Wolves actually do the opposite this year and maybe look a little bit better than they actually are compared to being better than they actually look.
One thing that makes our team preview podcast better than they look is a segment that we like to do called 5 Questions.
Yep.
And it's just where we ask 5 questions to each other. It's pretty damn obvious.
Straightforward.
It's straightforward to the point. So, fire away, Josh.
Yeah. So, one of the issues that's been a problem for the T-Wolves recently is Ricky Rubio's inability to really finish well around the basket. Do you think he's actually going to flash some improved finishing ability this year, considering it's a contract year?
I don't know. Apparently, he's been working on getting a floater for a couple of years. That's like the big thing with Ricky. He needs a floater, like, so bad. It's kind of crazy that he spent all of these years, playing professional basketball and doesn't have a floater yet. But I think if he can get that going, he could have an improved finishing ability, but he's been supposedly working on that for a number of years, and it hasn't really materialized into much. So I'm 50-50 on it, because, as we all know, profit incentive really helps people to do certain things.
Trevor Ariza.
Exactly. And Ricky wants that max.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to get it, but go ahead.
No. I think part of it is there's been also an emphasis on him developing his shot. And to his credit, it has gotten better, and the people who act like Ricky is a terrible shooter aren't paying attention.
Nope.
He's not god-awful shooter. He's not great. But in terms of, actual shooting, I think he shot near 40% from above the break threes.
Yeah.
So, the guy can shoot. It's just he doesn't have a particularly quick release, and he's not that good off the bounce.
Right.
But
he's
more importantly, his field goal percentage is down because he's really bad at finishing around the rim. Historically bad at it.
Yeah.
So, I think it'll probably improve a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be something where, it gets to the point where people are like, holy crap. Ricky
he's
for
like
MIP.
Russell Westbrook.
No. So. But,
I agree with that.
Okay, so since we're talking Ricky, and it's a contract year, do you think the T-Wolves are going to re-sign Ricky this offseason, and how much might they be willing to actually give him?
Okay, so this is where things get a little crazy, because you never know. With these contracts, the way they play out, it's so crazy. But I think they re-sign him. I do think they re-sign him. Having said that, with the way the market's working, and with the way the market for point guards currently is, it doesn't really play very nicely into Ricky's favor.
No.
I'm thinking somewhere in like the 4-ish years, about 12 mil would be nice for him. If he can get that, I'd say I should be pretty happy. But a lot of this depends on how he plays this year.
I would be somewhat shocked actually if he got $12 million a year. I could see him being.
So that'd be good for him.
Yeah. I think I could see him being forced into kind of like a $8 to $10 million a year type deal over 4 years, just because once again the market is saturated with starting point guards.
True.
Almost every team has a really good quality one that they might or might not think is better than Ricky right now. And you factor in Ricky's lack of kind of his own scoring ability, and that's going to hit him pretty hard when it comes to the free agency market for him.
Contracts are based on his points.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. All it takes is one team, so it's possible there's a team out there that is focused on what he does bring and has pieces that can cover for what he doesn't. But yeah, I think it's likely that he is going to be re-signed by the T-Wolves, but he's not going to get anywhere near the max that he's asking for, or rather his agent is.
Right. And again, a lot of the stuff, that TV deal thing, who knows?
Yeah.
What I do know is that Nikola Pekovic is on a minutes restriction. I've read the number in a couple places, around 27 is what they're looking at for him, and that's mostly due to his ankle problems that he's been having since last year. So with that in mind, do we think that Gorgui Dieng can take over the starting spot, and should he?
I don't think he takes over the starting spot unless Nikola actually misses a fair number of games.
Okay.
I think Nick is still going to be the starter. Gorgui is going to get the rest of those center minutes, basically.
Yeah.
And he's going to get a fair amount of minutes at the 4, too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, given that Peck hasn't always been particularly good at playing a lot of games in the NBA so far per season, but Gorgui definitely has the opportunity to become a starter this year, but it's only really going to happen if Peck is out of several games, or if Peck is actually traded at some point.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Speaking of the minutes restriction, Peck's still on that minutes restriction. Kevin Love is gone. So who is this team going to turn to for shot creation?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Probably going to still be Kevin Martin for the primary option, and the rest is going to be kind of put onto guys who aren't necessarily going to be well suited for high-level shot creation responsibilities. Obviously, Ricky is a very good shot creator for others.
His teammates, exactly.
For himself, no. So that in some ways is problematic offensively because of how the defense covers him. But he's going to be able to get people good looks. Thad can do some shot creation. Like we mentioned, Anthony Bennett, he's shown the capability of being able to create his own looks out of the post and through ISOs. So he's another option. I also wouldn't be surprised if they give Wiggins and Levine a lot of opportunities to try and create for themselves. They probably will struggle with it. Part of that is they're rookies. Part of it is neither of them really necessarily have that skill set right now. But it's really going to be mostly on Kevin Martin's shoulders. And Kevin Martin is primarily, at least recently, more of an off-ball type guy.
Yeah, an off-ball
he's a capable on-ball guy, but he hasn't really done that in a season or two.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how this breaks down, but I think it's going to be more of an ensemble type effect in terms of the shot creation, and because of that, it's probably not going to be as good.
Yeah, speaking of ensembles, the T-Wolves have quite the ensemble of young talent. And Andrew Wiggins, Zach LaVine, Anthony Bennett, Shabazz Muhammad. Do you think any of them wind up being an all-star in the next 3 years?
In the next 3 years, no. Okay. I think there's a couple of those guys have the ability to. Like I said, if he can get his confidence right and stay healthy and put in the right opportunities, I think Bennett could at some point be an all-star in this league.
Yep.
I'm not suggesting he could be a superstar, just that he could be make an all-star roster.
Luol Deng made all-star teams.
Well, Luol Deng's good too, but more like Jamal Magloire made a single all-star team, something like that.
It's like okay, I gotcha.
Not to say that Bennett couldn't make multiple ones. I'm just saying I think he has potential to be an all-star type guy given his offensive skill sets.
Yep.
Another guy who probably will have a decent shot of it, assuming things play out the way almost everyone else seems to think they will, is Andrew Wiggins.
Yep.
I was talking with a friend about this earlier today, actually, and how we both kind of agreed. I think the idea for everybody basically is that he's going to be the next Paul George. A defensive-focused prospect who's able to develop into an offensive guy. And I think that's going to be apt perception-wise and reality-wise, because Paul George is a very good off-ball guy right now. But there's this perception that he's this killer number one offensive option who can break down the defense and go Kobe on you. And in reality, he's not.
No.
And I think that's kind of the future for Wiggins right now, too. Assuming he continues to develop, I think he can kind of become Paul George-esque in the sense that he'll make an impact defensively and he'll get opportunities offensively to put up numbers that make people want to vote for him or to put him in as a reserve. So I think he has a lot of potential to be selected as an all-star, but I'm not so certain that within the next 3 years the reality is going to be the same as perception.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head there. So speaking of hitting the nail on the head, sometimes we might hit the nail on the head with our 20, 50, 80 predictions, but Hopefully. We give ourselves an out because we say that they're 20% likely, 50% likely, and 80% likely to happen. And that lets us say crazy stuff that you can pretty much bank on, and some stuff that's kind of in between. So, Josh, what are your predictions looking like for this Wolves team?
I think it's 20% likely that Anthony Bennett actually winds up in the top 10 in most improved player votes. I think he's going to have a much better year this year. And because of that, and because of how low expectations are going to be for him this year, he's going to catch some people's eyes in terms of, wow, he got a lot better.
Yeah.
That said, it's only 20% in my mind because, generally speaking, second-year guys don't get a lot of votes for most improved player. And there's probably going to be a lot of players out there who are going to be given slightly larger roles and opportunities this year that should see improvements in their production. And let's be honest, it's per-game production that drives a lot of the voting for these type of awards. So I think he's got a shot at being top 10 in most improved player votes.
Yep.
I think it's 50% likely that at some point the T-Wolves trade Nikola Pekovic in order to open up more time for Gorgui Dieng, and in the process pick up maybe another draft pick or a young player in return to continue to add to their young core that they're trying to build.
Yeah, that's a big contract.
Yeah, and
an injury-prone dude.
If they're indeed actually trying to shift to more of an up-tempo type offense, Peck doesn't make as much sense then.
Right. It'll be interesting
and I love
to see.
Peck.
I love Peck too. It'll be interesting to see. I'm just saying, it'll be interesting to see if they can move an injury-prone dude on a long-term $10+ million contract.
Yeah. I think they will. They'll be somebody who would be willing to bite, assuming he actually does get put on the trade block.
Yep.
I think it's 80% likely that the T-Wolves have 2 NBA slam dunk contestants in Andrew Wiggins and Zach LaVine. In fact, I would bet, well, not a lot of money because I don't have a lot of money, but I would probably bet some money that those 2 both wind up being in the slam dunk contest this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that mostly depends on if they do that stupid format again this year, or if they do it like an actual dunk contest.
Either way, those 2 are going to be in it.
Okay. Speaking of gonna be in it, I'm gonna go a little off the record here, like a little not off the record, but I'm gonna go a little off the notes, and say that in terms of the 6th man of the year race, Gorgui Dieng is gonna be in it. I think that he could put up 15-ish, 9-ish, 2 blocks on good percentages, and I think he could probably wind up being a top 4 or top 5 vote getter for 6th man of the year, considering that Peck's going to be starting.
I take it that's your 20% likely.
That is my 20% likely prediction.
Cool. I don't disagree. I think he's going to get an opportunity to put up really good numbers, especially if Peck gets moved or is injured for a stretch of time. I like Gorgui a lot, and I think you're spot on.
Yeah, another thing that might be spot on is that the Wolves lead the league in steals.
They have a lot of guys. Ricky was second in the league in steals.
Ricky was second.
And they've got a lot of guys who are
Corey Brewer was top 5 in steals. Yeah. He ranked 4th. They have Thaddeus Young, who was second in steals overall and was 3rd in steals per game. They have 3 dudes in the top 6.
Yeah, and that's not including the fact that they'll probably try to play a more up-tempo pace, and one of the best ways to do that is to generate turnovers.
Get in transition, yeah.
Yeah, so, and you factor in Andrew Wiggins is a long, athletic defender on the wing who likes to play defense, so he's probably going to get some steals himself, too.
Absolutely. And going from like a guy like Peck to a guy like Gorgui Dieng is also going to bump that up a little bit. Not much, but it's going to do it a little bit. So I think that they have as good of a shot as anybody, but again, there's 29 other teams.
Yeah, you generally have to kind of be 50-50 when you're talking about the rest of the league compared to you.
There's 29 other teams, but I think they have as good of a chance. They have the best chance.
I think you're pretty on point. The only other one might be Sixers, just because of how aggressively.
Because how long and aggressive they are. Exactly. Yeah. And then my 80% prediction is that Andrew Wiggins has a good year. Good. But people still wind up disappointed.
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to be able to live up to the hype.
There's a lot of pressure
at least now
on him. Not only does he have to suffer from the first overall pick hype, which we can see what happens when you don't get off to a good start, as evidenced by Anthony Bennett.
Yeah.
But on top of it, like we mentioned, he's been hyped for years as like the next LeBron level type guy coming down the line. Yeah, so
he's not even there.
The hype's kind of gone down a little bit since college, which makes sense. Yeah, but it's still pretty high.
People are saying like it went from LeBron to Paul George. No one's saying, like, in 5 years, he might be like Luol Deng on moon shoes.
Well, one thing I remember hearing was maybe it was in the transition from LeBron to Paul George was T-Mac. So the expectations seem to be going down somewhat, but they're still really high.
Yeah.
And Wiggins is going to be good defensively this year, and he might even put up decent production in terms of box score stats. But it's unlikely that he's going to really be the kind of primary shot creation, 20-point a game type scorer that is probably expected of him.
Yeah, at least not now. You know, check back in 5 years.
Yeah,
he's 19.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, everything boils down to one question, and that question is this team going to be good? Josh, your thoughts?
According to SportsCenter top 10 highlight reels during the season, yes. But in reality, no. Once again, they're going to be on the outside looking in come playoff time, and that decade-long streak of missing the playoffs is going to keep going.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as far as bad teams go, they'll be one of the more watchable ones with all those alley-oops and free-sisted dunks. But they're still going to struggle. Having said that, you have Ricky Rubio throwing alley-oops to Andrew Wiggins.
And Zach LaVine. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. If you're in a rebuilding or retooling sort of team, it should at least be fun. And I think this team's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of wraps up my thoughts on them. Josh, do you have any final words?
They'll probably be a league pass favorite, but won't really be knocking on that playoff door or flirting with 500.
Agreed. So that concludes our 2014-15 Minnesota Timberwolves team preview. Feel free to leave a thumbs up if you liked it, a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Leave a comment maybe saying why or what you think about this team or its players. And if you like this video, there's a subscribe button down there. If you hit that, you'll be notified of all of our future team previews. It's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. So I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, take care.
Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.